Hello. Welcome to This Week in Politics. This has been a busy week and a non-busy week in politics. Busy in that everybody in the mainstream media has been going crazy because of Jim Comey. Not busy because those of us that know that it's all a big lie could care less. So as the week has gone on, I had decided that I'm giving him no time at all. I'm not going to. He's got a book coming out it's a self-congratulatory, self-righteous, holier than thou account from his lips, supposed to have credibility. It has none, in my opinion. Um, and so he's going out and he's hitting all of the liberal mainstream media TV shows, The View, MSNBC, CNN. I mean, he's purposely going out and hitting friendly press. He went to one place where he did an open forum, and an independent press, conservative press person by the name of Laura Loomer called him out. And he didn't know how to handle it. So there's obviously a reason he is not going out before the general public. He's going out before his friends. Now, for those of you that don't know about the James Comey thing, let me kind of encapsulate what happened. James Comey used to be the head of the FBI. And while he was the head of the FBI, there was a lot of things that happened. And the big one was the email scandal from Hillary Clinton. And that was grossly mismanaged on his part. It's obvious that it was a cover up. It's obvious that there was payoff. And we know a lot of this because Comey testified to that effect under oath in front of the committees. So what exactly did Comey do? We know for a fact that he exonerated Hillary Clinton in a memo before any interviews, before he saw any information, before he went over any emails. He was writing her exoneration. We know that to be a fact. He testified to that, and so did other people. Then 10 days before the election, he brought it up again, and he said he did it because of the polls. He was sure that she would win, and he had to CYA because if she had won or lost and it came out after the election that he didn't say something about the 30,000 emails they found on Weiner's laptop, then it would look like a cover-up. So he thought he was safe to bring it out then. The problem with that? The FBI is not supposed to be political at all. It's supposed to be about getting the bad guys. And he admits that he used polling and politics and the front runner in a presidential election to make his decision about what to do with those emails. Again, that's against the law. Now, fast forward a little bit. When Trump is president, he goes in to tell Trump about the P file. This is that made up dossier that was done, that was paid for in full by the Clinton presidential campaign during the election. They used it, it didn't work. So now that the election was over and she lost, they found a way to get it into the media. And Comey goes in and talks to the president about the information he has. He never mentions that it's a product of the Clinton presidential campaign. He never mentions that it was a political hit piece. He never mentions that it was gotten and paid for by the Clinton Foundation. He never mentions that a MI6 agent is the one who wrote it, and he never admits that it's all made up. All he says is, we have this information and we think you should be aware. After he does that, he runs out to his car and makes memos, which is illegal, by the way. You can't do that even as an FBI head. You can't violate the privacy of the commander in chief without him knowing about it. And the fact that he's writing a memo to the file, not to anybody else, but to the file, for those of you that are in business, know that it's called papering the file. And what that does is it's like a grain of sand. The more grains of sand you have, the more credibility it lends to whatever it is you're writing in the memos. So every time he goes in there and talks to the president, he makes out a memo so that it looks like he's papering the file. No credibility at all. It's just an administrative move. When he sees that's not working, then he takes this memo that is property of the FBI, okay, and then he gives it to his friend, which is illegal, and instructs his friend to give it to the Washington Post, which is illegal. That's leaking confidential information about the president to the public. You can't do that. That is illegal. And when asked about it under oath, he admits that he did these things. And when asked why, he said, because I wanted to get a special counsel to investigate the president. It worked. And based on that information is how they got Robert Mueller. Now, that information was gotten from the P file. That P file was totally made up, a total political hit piece. But nobody was told that. Everybody in politics knew it, but the judge on the FISA court was not told. He thought it was valuable information gathered by legitimate sources. And because of that, they got the FISA warrant. Because they got the FISA warrant, they got to listen in to Trump's people, which is how they got one or two of them on technicalities and so-called lies, which really weren't. The whole reason that they used it was to spy on Trump and his administration. That is pretty much how we got to where we are. When Trump found out what a untrustworthy, backstabbing rascal this guy was, Trump fired him. Mueller is now going to use the firing of Comey as the basis for obstruction of justice, which, if you look at the facts, it's nothing could be further from the truth. But as we have learned in this past year or year and a half, the Democrats and the liberals are not the least bit interested in facts or justice. They are interested in undoing the American people's will and getting rid of Trump at any cost for any reason, including American sovereignty and American law. And that's the fact. So that's where we are. So Comey gets fired. He writes a book, makes millions of dollars out of it. Now he's going on the road to sell his book. It's all about the money. It's all about the fame. And with Comey, it really is about he really is a narcissist. And it's all about him being the last holy arbiter of truth, justice, and the American way, if you read his book. And because he's going to the mainstream media, he's getting softball questions, which they do that to all the liberals that come out. They have the same interview, and Stephanopoulos is the guy that interviewed Comey, the big interview. If you put a conservative Republican in that seat across from Stephanopoulos would rip him apart. Stephanopoulos does no such thing to Comey. He treats him like a hero, like a righteous arbiter. So, after I promised myself that I was going to give Comey no time and no publicity at all, I am reading the Wall Street Journal on Friday in the op-ed pages, and I come across a piece by Kimberly Strassel, and it's called An Honest Comey Interview. Now, I did a piece, about a year ago, where no, I guess it's been about a year and a half ago where they were doing the presidential elections, and I called it If I Were the Interviewer. And I went through and I asked questions. And I considered doing that with Comey, but like I said, I didn't want to give him any space. But this Kimberly Strassel did a magnificent job of asking questions that should have been asked if it were an honest interview and Stephanopoulos was truly interested in honesty. These are the questions he would have asked. Now, I'm going to go through here and I'm going to read some of these questions and maybe comment on them as we go. I want to start by the beginning of her ad where it says, people forget that directors of the FBI, by necessity, are among Washington's most skilled operators, experts in appearing to answer questions, even as they provide pablum. Yet the publicity tour rolls on, which means that upcoming interviewers still have an opportunity to do the country and our profession a favor. Here are a few basic questions Mr. Comey should be expected to answer. You ready? You admit that Christopher Steele dossier was still unverified, that's the P file, when the FBI used it as a basis for a surveillance warrant against Carter Page. Please explain. Remember I said that they got the FISA warrant from the FISA judge and did not tell the judge that it was a political hit piece. The judge thought it was a piece of intelligence. And it says here that Mr. Comey admitted that it was still unverified, which takes it out of the realm of intelligence and puts it into the category of hearsay at the very least. But if the judge had known the background of that information, the FISA warrant would never have been healed unless the judge is crooked too. Also, explain the decision to withhold from the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, FISA, that the dossier was financed by the Hillary Clinton campaign. Okay. A couple of things that I want to say about this. First off, to get a political hit piece done by a political party is not uncommon. It's done all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. To pay for it, there's nothing wrong with that. The problem is this. Under American law and election law, it is illegal for foreigners to have anything to do with our elections. Christopher Steele is an MI6 agent from England. For him to have anything to do with this election or anything afterwards is illegal. So Clinton and the Clinton election committee violated the law without question. And Comey admits that it's unverified when they go to the FISA court. So when Comey takes the P file to the judge on the FISA court, okay, and they're making their case, trying to get a warrant to surveil the incoming administration or the Trump campaign. They want to surveil the Trump campaign. Now think about that. The FBI, who is not supposed to be political, who is not supposed to have anything to do with politics, is asking the FISA judge to authorize surveilling a possible presidential campaign. And to do that, they've used a foreigner to put together this file, a made-up file with no verification, no proof, presented it to a judge as intelligence, even though Comey admits it was unverified and at the very best was speculation, and asking the judge to give a surveillance warrant to the FBI on an incoming political campaign. That's unheard of. And yet, Comey is guilty of doing that and manipulating the system enough to get the warrant. The next question. You refer to Mr. Steele as a credible source. Does the FBI routinely view as credible sources who work for political operatives? Did the FBI do any due diligence on his employer, Fusion GPS? Were you aware it is an operation research firm? If not, why not? That's an outstanding question. So here's the progression of what happened. The Clinton Foundation hired their attorney, trying to wash their hands clean. The attorney hired uh, Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS hired the MI6 agent Robert Steele. Comey knew how this whole thing worked. He knew how it came about. He knew Steele wrote it. He knew that Steele was hired by Fusion GPS. And if he didn't, the head of the Justice Department, Andrew McCabe's wife, worked for Fusion GPS, who was Comey's boss. See the incestuous here? Comey worked for McCabe. McCabe's wife worked for GPS. GPS was paid to do the hit piece. She's asking the question here, and let me re-ask. You call Steele a credible source, and he says, do you routinely call people with credible sources who work for political operatives, which means they write political hit pieces? Were you aware it is an operation research firm? So she's putting him on the spot here. If he says, yes, I'm aware of it, she's going to say, then why didn't you tell the Fusion judge? And if he says, no, I was not aware of that, she's going to say, then how could you possibly present that to the Fusion or to the FISA judge as a credible source if you were not aware of its origins? See, there's no way to lie out of that question. Either way, he's caught, but nobody's going to ask that question. Mr. Steele, by his own admission, briefed the press on the dossier in the fall of 2016 to harm the Trump campaign, although the FBI ordered him not to. Are these the actions of a credible source? The sourcing in these articles, particularly one that ran in Yahoo News, was hard to mistake, yet the FBI soon after assured the FISA court that its credible source had not spoken to the media. Either the FBI failed to follow up on the stories, or it did, and Mr. Steele lied to your agents. Which is it? Okay. That's a beautiful question. Again, she's following up with these credible sources. And I remember that one piece of information is not going to get the warrant. So what Comey did is he took the P file, leaked it to the press wrote the story, then he took the copy of the articles and used that to back up the FISA warrant. That's how he got the warrant, by using additional information, again, from a bogus piece of information. Yet, the FBI soon after assured the FISA court that its credible source had not spoken to the media, which he knew was a lie. They have it on tape. So, because of that, one of two things happened. Either the FBI failed to follow up on the stories, or it did and Mr. Steele lied to your agents. Which is it? Again, no way to lie out of that question. And no matter which way Comey answers, he's at fault. You say you knew the dossier was funded by a Democrat-aligned group, but that you never knew which one. Why not? Didn't the FBI have a duty to find out? And by the way, that's a lie. He knew exactly. A Democrat-aligned group that was willing to pay $11 million for a hit piece on Trump. Now, let's think about the possibilities. The DNC had all but blocked Bernie Sanders out of the nomination at this point. He's done. So the only people that have a vested interest in it that are Democrat-backed groups are the Clinton presidential campaign, the Clinton Foundation, the DNC, which Clinton at this point controlled, which is a whole nother story I've done, or anybody that they have hired. Now, due diligence on the FBI to get this piece of information should have, at the very least, picked up the phone and made a couple of phone calls and said, "Hey, did you guys write this? Did you guys pay for this? Where is this coming from?" He did not. So she asked, "You never knew which one. Why not? Why didn't you do due diligence and at least make a couple of phone calls? Didn't the FBI have a duty to find out?" Absolutely. If you're going to ask to surveil, you either did one of two things. You either didn't do it and the judge is at fault, or you didn't do it and you lied to the FISA judge. Either one of those, you're liable and you're wrong. Next question. Please explain the extraordinary accommodations the FBI provided Team Clinton during the email investigation. Why was Cheryl Mills, whose email suggested she had early knowledge of the irregular server as Mrs. Clinton's chief of staff, allowed to claim attorney-client privilege and represent Mrs. Clinton at her interview? That's a really good question. If two people are in cahoots to break the law and they go for an interview and one acts as the other's attorney, isn't that a conflict of interest? Why did the interview happen only at the end? Again, they had determined Mrs. Clinton was not going to be prosecuted at the beginning. They didn't even do the interview till the end of the process, especially since you say any cause hung entirely on her intent. Well, let me tell you about intent. I watched all of those hearings where she was interviewed, and she is a bold-faced liar, and she's not very good at it, by the way, but she is a liar. And when she was interviewed by Comey, it was not under oath. It was not even done by him. She had her attorney there. It was not recorded. I mean, think about that. A huge scandal. The head of the FBI is not present. She has her attorney. It's not recorded. She's not under oath. She's under no obligation. She's here as a friend. You think that wasn't prearranged? After the hearings, now, and there is a famous thing that if you want to really get behind and know what's going on, there is an interchange that lasts about 10 or 12 minutes between Trey Gowdy and James Comey while Comey is under oath. And Trey Gowdy asked him a series of questions, proving Mrs. Clinton to be a liar all the way through. And at the end, he says that she is guilty, that he cannot prove intent. So he's not going to prosecute, which, by the way, was not his point to make. That was the head of the Justice Department, which is another story. But anyway, so immediately after that, I went around and I watched all of the pundits, and of all of the judges that were interviewed, they were all chomping at the bit. And when you hear these attorneys explain how you prove intent, what it takes to prove intent in a court of law, and you compare those standards to what Comey had just said about Clinton, there was no question at all. An average judge or an average attorney could have proved intent on Clinton's part. So obviously, there was something going on there, because just an average person could have proven intent. without question. You've surely now read the text between the FBI's Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, two lovers, by the way. That happened on your watch. Is this appropriate FBI behavior? Now, the things that went between them were treasonous. They were planning on not allowing Trump to get elected, and then when he got elected, they needed an insurance policy to keep him from becoming president. And then when he became president, they were discussing how to get him out as president and how disgusting and how stupid the American people were. And it goes on and on and on. That's what she's referring to. Should we believe such behavior is limited to them? One of the emails that they sent, they were talking about being in the office planning the overthrow of our president with Andrew McCabe, who eventually got fired and is now going to be tried. And I hope he's tried for treason. And that being said, I hope Strzok and his girlfriend get it also. In addition to overt political bias, which is a no-no for the Justice Department and the FBI, the texts prove the FBI took politics into account, worrying, for instance, about how much manpower to put into investigating the woman who could be our next president. Why should the public have any faith in the integrity of the Clinton or Trump investigation? And there is the rub for the whole thing. And going in and surgically removing these bad actors, I think, is a bad mistake. I think at some point, and I'm not sure that we've gotten to that point yet, but at some point, the Trump administration, either through a surrogate or Trump himself, needs to go through the Justice Department, the FBI, the CIA, the EPA, the IRS, and everybody from a certain level up is fired. I believe those departments have good people. They're all liberals, of course, but I think they have good people that truly will do the will of the president and their boss. They're not going to purposely obstruct, and if they do, they need to be fired. But the higher echelons are all plants by liberal Democrats. They all have an agenda, and they will all obfuscate and absolutely not do the will of the president. They all need to be fired and be replaced. If Trump can't get the help of the Congress, then he needs to do it arbitrarily. Find a way to get that done. But and it's not for retribution. It is because the American people now see, know, and realize that there is two sets of justice, one for everyday Americans and one for the politically connected. And I can tell you, as I sit here right now, Clinton will never see the inside of a jail as much as she deserves it. And Bill, as much as why? Because they have paid off, they have enough blackmail on people. People will bend themselves into pretzel shapes before they give up Clinton. That's just the way it is. In fact, that explains why everybody was given immunity in connection with the email case, even though they had no proof and they weren't going to prosecute. Still, the FBI gave everybody immunity. Why did they do that? Because nobody is going to flip on Clinton. And because of that, the American people have no faith in those departments, and they need to be gutted and started over. Just like when Trump was running and he said, drain the swamp, that's exactly what needs to happen. Get those bureaucrats out of there and start over. The text ridicule former Attorney General Loretta Lynch's decision to step aside from the Clinton probe since she knows no charges will be brought. This was before the FBI even interviewed Mrs. Clinton. I told you that Comey had written that memo exonerating her. And it contradicts your claim, Mr. Comey, at the start of your July 2016 press conference that no one in the Justice Department knew what you were about to say. Please explain. Because we now know from Comey and from other witnesses, specifically Strzok, that before he had seen any of the memos, before he had interviewed anybody, including Mrs. Clinton, James Comey was writing a memo exonerating her from all wrongdoing. You think that might be a little bit of horse before the cart? Next question. Former Deputy Director Andrew McCabe leak and lack of candor also happened on your watch. Should he be prosecuted for lying? Absolutely, and that is happening as we speak. Should Mr. Steele be prosecuted for lying to the FBI about his leaks to the press? Absolutely. That has not been pursued yet because Mr. Steele is an English citizen. He is not a citizen of the United States. So anything that happens to him will be done in absentia or with the help of the English government. If the answer to either is no, please explain why the FBI holds one standard for the public and one for its own. Well, I just touched on that. And that is exactly the truth. That is not a perception. That is not a one-off. I mean, if you go down the list of the people that are involved in this, starting all the way back with Loretta Lynch, I think that was her name, the one in the IRS office in Ohio back under the Obama administration, all of these people were guilty of sin, admitted to it under oath, and nothing's going to happen to them. There's Loretta Lynch, Andrew McCabe, who is being prosecuted, but I'll be surprised if anything happens. Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Debbie, what's her name, Schultz, Podesta, Obama, Fusion GPS, Steele. I mean, the list is very, very long. There's lots of payola. There's a lot of blackmail. There's a lot of nastiness behind the scene. And we as the American people, just as Kimberly Strassel is saying in this article, is we know. We don't think. We know, and we have proof that there are two sets of justice, one for the everyday American and one for the politically and financially connected. Next question. You dismissed Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein's memo. Oh, he's another one of the swamp, by the way. Memo as nothing but a pretext to fire you. Remember, he wrote, he gave cover to Trump to fire Comey by writing a memo explaining why he needed to be fired. Yet you didn't address its claims. Please point to the internal policies or regulations that gave you the authority to announce that Mrs. Clinton was being cleared and why. Remember, I said earlier that when he was under oath and he went down the whole list of things that she did wrong, he said the Justice Department was not going to recommend, the FBI was not going to recommend prosecution because they couldn't prove intent. And I said that was not his job to do that. That was the head of the Justice Department to make that call, not his. And so here, Kimberly Strassel is calling him to account to say, under what authority did you do that? Please provide any examples of similar announcements by FBI directors. There is none. Please address the criticisms of the prior attorneys general and deputy attorneys general from both parties cited in the Rosenstein memo. Rosenstein's memo painted out in very detailed reasons why he should be fired, and it was that memo was confirmed. The information in there was attested to and confirmed by ex-attorneys general that Rosenstein was on solid ground, Comey was not, thus he was fired. Next question. You justify your decisions to divulge FBI investigation details on the grounds it served the public interest. Remember I said at the beginning, he was the last bastion of self-righteousness in government, in his opinion. And here she's calling him on him. And who is he to decide the public interest? Would it not have been in the public interest to make clear last year that the president was not under investigation? It would have, but that would not have served his political interest. He wanted Trump gone. He hates Trump. He absolutely despises Trump and will do and say anything and write anything, obviously, to make that happen. And she's proving that by asking the question. And the last question, sometimes making everybody mad is a sign of doing things right. More often, it's a sign you screwed up, Mr. Comey. Is it possible, just maybe, that you made a mess of things? Now, that's an opinion, and she did that for a reason. To sum up, I think Kimberly Strassel did a magnificent job. And if you ever watch this, Kimberly, congratulations. Uh, very thorough. There's many questions more we could have asked, uh, having to do with McCabe and that whole interaction and how McCabe got picked. Um, the him, Comey, Rosenstein, and McCabe's interaction on the Clinton initiative to sell 20% of our uranium, the bribery that went on in effect to do that. I mean, there's many places we could have gone. But for the specifics and for the book, you did an outstanding job. Now, before I close, I just want to hit a couple of current events. One of them I didn't have written down, just happened today. We talked last week about that, or 2 weeks ago, about a caravan going through Mexico from South America, headed to the U.S. border. And in response, Trump had called the Mexican leader, trying to get him to disband them. Then he called out the National Guard to protect our borders. I do not know how many have been deployed, but I do know some. And I do know that today, as we record this on Sunday, the first part of that caravan has reached the border. We have no idea what's going to happen. I suspect it's going to be a face-off, and there may even be gunfire. I don't know. But they have reached the border. We'll see what happens. Also this week, Barbara Bush died. She was the second lady under Ronald Reagan from 1980 to 1988, and she was the first lady under her husband from 1988 to 1992. Many people thought she was an outstanding first lady. I think the public got a full day to pay their respects down in Texas. And she passed away at 92 years old on April 15th, 1918, tax day, of course. And as we now know, Comey's book and interviews started this week. And the overall message that Comey wants to get through in this book is Trump is morally unfit to be president, says the man who committed 2 or 3 felonies, got fired from his job, lied under oath, and many other dubious behaviors. And he has the gall, the unmitigated gall, to state that Trump is morally unfit to be president. Unbelievable. It is amazing the amount of justification a person can go to justify their behaviors and their positions. Absolutely unbelievable. Well, that's about all the stories I wanted to cover this week. This program, like all our programs, are sponsored by the Prayer Box Ministry. If you'd like to know a little bit more about who we are, what we do, you can find us online at www.prayerboxministry.org. That's O-R-G. Go over there and check us out. There's a lot to do. That website was designed to be an interactive website. You can join a prayer group. You can have somebody read the Bible to you. You can watch videos. All of our programs are streamed over there. Lots to do over there. Go over there and check us out. www.prayerboxministry.org. Well, you all have a great week. I look forward to next week when we can sit down and talk about this week in politics.